Hello, and thank you for joining the MMA Mic Drop podcast. My name is Jade Bunky, and I'm typically joined by MMA Milo, but he is out doing something so ridiculously dangerous that it boggles the mind. And if you stick around for the entirety of this show, I will let you know exactly what he's doing. But we have a big fight card to get to. I'm going to give you some picks and predictions for every single fight that's about to go down at UFC 310, and this is a really good fight card. If I'm to sum it up in one word, I would say deep. It's really deep. There's something interesting from every single fight on this card, from the early prelims all the way to the main event. Every fight is interesting. If I were to give it a grade, I'd give it a B+. It's a really strong card, like I said, but the only downside is there's two fights on the main card that, even though they're compelling matchups, they're not main card level fights. But on the prelims, there's a couple fights that should be on the main card. So it's kind of a tricky card in terms of bout order, but nonetheless, this is a fight card worth tuning in for. And I'm going to give you breakdowns for every single fight. So let's get started. First up, it's a championship fight. It's a flyweight fight between Alexandre Pantoja and Kaya Asakura. And this is an interesting fight. This is a debut for Kaya Asakura into the UFC. He has a really big brand. He's actually kind of a megastar in Japan. And he's taken his first fight in the UFC, and it is a title fight, which is pretty insane. But when you really think about it, it kind of makes sense. So let's break down each fighter. When you look at Alexandre Pantoja, he does not get the credit he deserves. When you look at the people he's beat Brandon Moreno, the number 2 ranked fighter and former flyweight champ. He beat him 3 times. He beat Brandon Royval twice. He's the number 1 ranked fighter. He's beat other top 10 fighters, Alex Perez, Manel Kape, and Steve Ercek. And he can beat you at any way. I mean, on the feet, on the ground. I mean, he's an incredible grappler. He's got power in his hands. I believe of his finishes, he has, I think, 10 submissions, 8 TKOs. He's really well-rounded, and he just, for some reason, doesn't get the respect he deserves. Now, on the money line, he does get the respect. I mean, he's a minus 285 favorite. Kaya Asakura comes in at a plus 230. And this is a big step up in competition for Kaya Asakura. But that's not to say he has fought a low level of competition. He has fought really high level people. In fact, he's even beat the current 9th ranked UFC fighter in the flyweight division, Manel Kape. So he has faced good competition. He's an electrifying fighter. He has really good power. I mean, they have different rules over there. So, he's pretty aggressive with grounded opponents, which, there are certain rules in the UFC that doesn't allow you to be as aggressive. You can't knee a grounded opponent in the head, for example, and where Kaya Asakura is fighting, you have a lot more flexibility, and he's been spectacular over there. The one thing where I'm a little concerned with Pantoja in this fight is his age. He is 34. And you're at that level, particularly at those those lower weight classes, where a small drop in speed can make a big difference. He looked good in his last fight, but at any time you might start to see some slowing. And will this be the fight? And will this be the one when he's going up against somebody who has some quick hands, who's somebody who's also big for the division? Remember, Kaya Asakura is going to have to come down in weight, and that could play a role. But in his power, both in his power that he can bring down to flyweight, but also on the flip side, what will his gas tank be in later rounds? And if he cuts a lot of weight and he's drained after the 3rd round, that could be a problem. And if he doesn't catch Pantoja early, that could be the story of the fight. And that's what I think is going to happen. I think Kaya Asakura is going to slow down. I think it's going to be a fun back and forth fight, but give me Pantoja by 5th round submission. All right, next up, we have Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Ciryl Gane. This is the best fight on the card. This is a fascinating fight. Now, this fight replaces Belal Muhammad versus Shavkat Rakhmonov, and it's a more interesting fight, and it's a title eliminator. So the stakes are really high. It's a 5-round fight. Neither guy has been defeated. Shavkat is 18-0. Ciryl Gane is 15-0. They've both looked good against increasingly advanced levels of competition. So something's got to give. So let's break down each fighter. So Ciryl Gane, I think, is a lot faster than a lot of people think. He was slightly slower than Michael Venom Page, but Michael Venom Page is the fastest guy in the division. I've watched Ian Garry fight live, and I mean, he has quick hands. He fights with a high degree of fluidity. He mixes his punches and his kicks very well. He has some okay grappling as well. And I know a lot of people don't like him. He is a bit of a punk, but he's a punk who can fight well. So this is a bit of a dangerous matchup for Shavkat. But conversely, this is a dangerous matchup for Ian Garry. Shavkat, like I've said, has finished everybody. And he's done it almost an even blend of submissions and TKOs. So he can beat you anywhere. And I think just a small amount of shine has come off Shavkat because he took a little bit of damage in the Jeff Neal fight. And I think the first thing to remember is Jeff Neal is good. You know, he's a top 10 ranked fighter who can put it on people. And Shavkat, I think the thing is just been so dominant that people were surprised to see him get stunned a little bit, but he still finished him. And he's finished, like I said, everybody he's fought. This is a fascinating fight. I think Ian Garry will have the edge on the feet in terms of hand speed and movement. I think Shavkat will have the advantage in terms of power. And I think Shavkat will have the advantage on the ground. And I think ultimately this fight will end up there. It'll end up in some clinches. I think Shavkat will get him to the ground. I think Shavkat will submit him. Give me Shavkat by 4th round submission in an incredibly fascinating fight. And Shavkat is the minus 375 favorite. Ian Garry comes in at a plus 295. So moving on to the featured bout. This is a really good fight as well. Ciryl Gane versus Alexander Volkov is minus 345. Alexander Volkov is plus 275. That's probably because they fought before. Ciryl Gane, outclassed him. Ciryl Gane, one of the best strikers in the heavyweight division, not in terms of power, but in terms of movement. He's really fluid. He's light on his feet. He's got a really nice jab, and he's hard to counter because he's much quicker than a lot of the bigger guys. And that's the problem with Volkov. He's going to be bigger. He's going to be a little bit slower. Now, the interesting thing is Volkov has improved, and he keeps making improvements to his game. And so will that translate in this fight? The problem is Volkov is also 36 years old. And in the heavyweight division, with his reach and his jab and his power, I don't think he has some thundering kicks. I don't think that would be that much of a problem. But losing a little bit of speed that's against somebody like Ciryl Gane, who's so light on his feet, will be a problem. And give me Ciryl Gane by a pretty even killed decision. I don't think this fight will be too exciting, but I think it will be fun to watch. If you're a real MMA fan, you might, find some value in just seeing exactly where each guy is and, appreciating the footwork and so forth. But it's not going to be one of those barn burners. It's not going to be up for fight of the night. Give me Ciryl Gane for decision. Now, next up, and this is one of my problems on the main card, it's Bryce Mitchell versus Kron Gracie. This has no business being on a pay-per-view at all. Kron Gracie's lost 2 in a row. Bryce Mitchell, yes, he's ranked 13, but he just got knocked out so badly by Josh Emmett. And then he beat Danny Ige. Before that, he lost to Ilya Topuria. And look, no shame in those 2 losses, but you look at somebody who's 1-2 in his last 3. You look at somebody who's 0-2 in his last 2. Why on earth should this be on the main event? I don't know. Kron Gracie, he comes from, royalty, in MMA and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, with that Gracie name. And he is an exceptional grappler, but this is mixed martial arts. So he's at a disadvantage on the feet, and he's at a significant disadvantage. And this is where the fight is interesting. I am interested in this matchup. I just don't think it should be on the main card because Bryce Mitchell's strength is in his grappling. Well, what happens if he comes up against a grappler a little bit better than him? Well, there should be some fascinating exchanges on the ground, but if Bryce Mitchell is smart, he should keep it on the feet. Even though he's not a great striker, he's a better striker than Kron Gracie, and if he keeps it safe, he'll win. And I'm looking at this. He's a minus 800 favorite. Kron Gracie is a plus 550 underdog. So, I think that speaks volumes to what people think about, Kron Gracie's, I think, full game on the UFC level against a top 15 guy. And I think if Bryce Mitchell is smart, I think he outclasses him on the feet. And that's a big if, because remember, Bryce Mitchell is one of the more interesting and entertaining characters in the UFC. He does believe the earth is flat. So I don't know. He may just say, hey, let me just see if I can out-grapple Kron Gracie. And who knows, he might get caught in a sub. That is possible. But give me Bryce Mitchell by third round TKO from a accumulation of damage, trying to stay safe and at distance on the feet, even though not the greatest striker, good enough to get this win pretty convincingly. All right, opening the card. And this is another fight that should not be on a pay-per-view. Nate Landwehr versus Dooho Choi. Now, don't get me wrong. This will be a good fight. This will be a fan-friendly fight. So I do kind of get it, I guess, if they didn't have the Kron Gracie fight on this main card. If it's one of those things where, I'm okay if a pay-per-view is stacked and then you bring in a novelty fight, that you can get away with that. Maybe not on this card because there's some good prelim fights that should take its place. But nonetheless, this will be fun. Nate the Train is going to come forward. Choi is going to come forward. I mean, it's going to be a head-on collision, like two trains crashing into each other. So it should be fun. What's going to happen? I have no idea. I think somebody's going to knock out. So this is going to be a pretty uneducated guess. Give me Choi to get a second round knockout and get that crowd all riled up. And let me just give you the odds. It's Nate Landwehr is -142, Choi plus 120. So I'm taking the underdog on that. Now, the top prelim fight. Now, this is one that could open the card. It's because both guys have some good name value. Anthony Smith versus Dominick Reyes. Dominick Reyes is absolutely going to destroy Anthony Smith. I know he's won once since since 2020 or something. It's been a while, right? And it was in his last win. It was against Dustin Jacoby, and he looked good. But it was short. It was a short fight. It didn't really tell as much. But what we have seen is Anthony Smith fight a lot recently. And I like Anthony Smith. He's just nowhere close to where he was. He can't hang with anybody on the feet anymore. He did snatch up a win versus Vitor Petrino because Anthony Smith is still crafty. He is still clever. And you look at his 38 wins, he has 35 of which come by finish, which is just unbelievable. If you make a mistake against Anthony Smith and you do something stupid like Vitor Petrino did, you're going to lose the fight. Dominick Reyes is not going to do this. Dominick Reyes, okay, even if he is not the same fighter he once was, he is absolutely going to light up Anthony Smith. He's a -340 favorite. Anthony Smith is plus 270. And if you bet on like one of those sites that accumulates points, such as FanDuel or DraftKings, I would definitely take Reyes on this because I think he's going to knock him down maybe once or twice. And because we know Anthony Smith is tough as nails, and then he's going to put it on him. Give me Dominick Reyes by a dominant first round finish. All right, next up, another pretty fun matchup: Vicente Luque versus Themba Gorimbo. Now, everybody knows the story of Themba Gorimbo, where he came here, he was sleeping in the gym, sleeping on a couch, The Rock bought him a house. I mean, it's a really incredible story. And it turns out Gorimbo's a pretty incredible fighter as well, because since then, I believe he's 4-0. He's looked good against increasingly good competition. He might be the real deal. I mean, he's fighting a ranked fighter in Vicente Luque, and I think he's going to get it done. Now, Luque, he comes forward. He's an action fighter. He's fun to watch, but I think, like Anthony Smith, maybe not to the same extent, he has fallen off. He's lost 3 out of his last 4 fights, granted against incredible top-level competition, but he just doesn't look like that same guy that can really withstand a firefight. He's probably the oldest 33-year-old you'll ever see because he's taken so much damage. And I think Gorimbo is just going to handle him. I mean, but I don't think it's going to be by knockout. I think he might hurt him on the feet a little bit. I think he's going to get him down. Give me Gorimbo by a third round submission. All right, before that, we have Movsar Evloev versus Aljamain Sterling. Okay, this is the problem with the card. This not only needs to be on the main card, this should be the featured bout on the main card. You have number 5, undefeated Evloev versus, let me just check out his ranking at welterweight, number 9 and former dominant champ, Aljamain Sterling. I have no idea why this is on the prelims. This is insane. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be the most exciting fight for maybe your casual fans, but I think it's a fascinating matchup. And I think most people are taking Movsar. And before I go on, I don't think I gave you the odds for the Luque versus Gorimbo. So Luque is plus 135, Gorimbo minus 162. Now, going back to Movsar Evloev, he is a minus 250 favorite against Sterling, who's a plus 205. Sterling has had one loss of in recent memory, and that was against Sean O'Malley. He got caught, right? And I don't think that plays out the same time if they fought over and over again. Now, Movsar's undefeated. He has looked good, but Aljamain Sterling has been, like I said, he was a dominant champ. He moved up. He beat Calvin Kattar, not in the most fan-friendly fight, but in a dominant way. Most people are taking Movsar Evloev. I'm going to take Sterling. I think he's going to lock up a body triangle in the first or second round. Maybe it might take him to the second round to get it. And I think he's going to ride that all the way through the round and finally get a submission and submit Evloev in the second round. And Evloev, I think he's a better wrestler. I think he's a better boxer. And Sterling will have trouble, I think, maybe taking him down at first, because if you watch Sterling fight, he likes to lunge a lot, goes for the single leg, and he leaves himself a little, not only vulnerable, but a little, he's easier to defend against than somebody that comes in and shoots a strong double leg. So he's a little tentative there. But this should be on the main card. You can even make the case that this could be the co-main event. I mean, I like the current co-main event, but at minimum, this should go above Ciryl Gane and Volkov. But give me Sterling by second round submission, and I might be way off on this one because everybody else is picking Evloev. All right, next up, and this is another fight that should probably open the card. I would swap this one out with the Nate Landwehr fight. Randy Brown versus Bryan Battle. Talk about one of the best last names for an MMA fighter, right? Bryan Battle. This is an exceptional fight. Randy Brown is good. He is better than his ranking suggests. I mean, he's outside of the top 15 ranking. I don't know. I think he's somewhere between 15 and 20. He is a top 15 guy in terms of talent, and he really should be ranked in the top 15. He is that good. And what this does for Bryan Battle, it's a good test for him. So Bryan Battle, he is 6-1 in the UFC, and it would be 7-1. Lusa fight was able to go on. There was a foul. They stopped the fight. But Bryan Battle was dominating that fight, and he has looked good. And I'm curious to see how good he is, because Randy Brown, I think the best way to frame this is it's Bryan Battle is being tested against a top 15 level opponent. So we'll know how good Bryan Battle is. Let's see. Brown is plus 190. Battle is minus 230. I think these odds are a little off. Randy Brown is very rangy, has a really, crisp jab. He moves well on his feet. He's 34. That might be a problem. And Bryan Battle is a pressure fighter. He comes at you. He's ready to throw down. This fight will be fascinating, and it will be high level. Give me Randy Brown by a really fun decision. But this one, I've gone back and forth. It could go either way. Chris Weidman, minus 115 against Eryk Anders, minus 105. I'm hoping this is a retirement fight for, Chris Weidman. It'd be great to see him, put down the gloves on the canvas in front of a large crowd at a pay-per-view, even if it's on the prelims, get that standing ovation, a little tribute to him. I think that would be cool. The problem is he's 40 years old, and I think he's going to struggle even against a slow Eryk Anders, who has looked better of late. Anders is 36. I think there's going to be a lot of clinching in this fight. I think it's going to be pretty slow paced. I don't think it's going to be fan friendly. I think Anders is going to take it. I think Anders is going to win the decision, and we'll see if Weidman retires. All right. And another incredible matchup. I love this fight. Cody Durden versus Joshua Van. Joshua Van is only 23 years old. I think he's 4-1 in the UFC. I think his only loss is to Charles Johnson. Cody Durden, and let me just try to look in here. I just want to be accurate here. So give me a second to take a look. Let's see. Okay, Zumagulov, Borjas. Yeah, 4-1. So think about that. 23-year-old, he's 4-1. He's a really good athlete, moves really well. He does get off to a bit of a slow start, and we know Cody Durden doesn't. Cody Durden likes to come after you. He's pretty aggressive. Cody Durden is, I think the better grappler and obviously more seasoned, but he's a plus 124 underdog. Van is a minus 148 favorite. I'm taking Durden. I think he gets him on the ground. I think he controls him in the wrestling. I think anything can happen in this fight, but I do expect Durden with a pretty solid 29-28 scorecard. Give me Durden by a really fun decision that really answers a lot of questions for both guys. All right, we just have 3 more fights to go. Michael Chiesa versus Max Griffin. This is a fun fight, and I'm glad it's early on the prelims. So it's 2 older vets that create a compelling matchup against each other. Michael Chiesa is an exceptional grappler. We saw what he did to Tony Ferguson in his last fight, and yes, Tony Ferguson is a bit washed now, but it just shows that Chiesa could still come into the mix and submit somebody at the UFC level. Max Griffin. He has better boxing. I mean, he has better boxing obviously than Michael Chiesa. But he's a solid fighter. He is though 39 years old, and that's a problem. But then again, Chiesa doesn't look like a young 36 either. He's pretty old as well, and I think he's fallen off a lot. In my mind, I'm visualizing Max Griffin just picking him apart on the feet. But right now on the fly, I'm going to make I don't know what it is. I think Chiesa, just maybe it's the age, even though this one's, I'm torn. I was going to go with Max Griffin, but I'm going to go with Michael Chiesa by 3rd round submission. So we'll see how that goes on Saturday. All right. Next up, we have Clay Guida versus Chase Hooper. This is another fun matchup. Clay Guida, everybody likes Clay Guida. He's 42 years old. He's still getting some wins against some of the lower level guys in the UFC. He's a wrestler. He comes in with a lot of movement, and you have to start to wonder at this age, does that movement take away from other things, that he can do? And, does it hamper, does it adversely affect the cardio at all? And cardio's always been his strength, but he's 42. So that is kind of, it's kind of curious to look at that. And Hooper is better than you think. I think a lot of people, including myself, wrote him off, after some early losses, but I think he's only 25 and he's 6-3 in the UFC. So think about that. A 25-year-old, 6-3 in the UFC. That's pretty good. And he's getting better. And we saw against his last fight in against Slava, his stand-up is a lot better because that's always been his Achilles heel, right? He's always been a really good grappler. And it's just, he gets lit up on the feet. Well, he looked pretty good on the feet against a really high-level striker in his last fight. And I'm not saying he's a great striker at this point, but he's an improving striker. And I think he's just an improving athlete because, he's only 25. He's only 25 years old. He's getting better. And I think at 25 years old, going against a 42-year-old, plus I think he's gonna handle Guida. And plus, these two have competed in a purely grappling match, and Chase Hooper won that fight. And I'm taking Chase Hooper. I'm thinking he's gonna be smothering. I think it's gonna be dominant, and I think he might get Guida out. Give me Chase Hooper by 3rd round submission. All right, opening the fight, Kennedy Nchukwu, I can never pronounce his name correctly, versus Lucas Bresky. This is kind of an interesting opener. I think it's, fun to see Kennedy, at heavyweight now. He was a light heavyweight. And it's funny, he moves up in weight from 205. He's not a small heavyweight. I think he weighed in at like 242 or something crazy. And, he's going to have a speed advantage. He's going to have an advantage in terms of athleticism. I just think Bresky is not that good. I don't see Kennedy having great upside in the heavyweight division. It might have been a good move, but I mean, he'll eventually run into problems. But against Bresky, he's going to starch him. He's going to starch him in the 1st round. Give me Kennedy by 1st round knockout. And let me give you the odds. Minus 600 for Kennedy, plus 440 for Bresky. And let me give you the odds of Clay Guida versus Chase Hooper as well, because I didn't do that. Clay Guida comes out at plus 670. And oh my God, Chase Hooper minus 1,050. So I guess the odds, indicate the magnitude of this mismatch. But it's still a fun fight. And I think an appropriate matchup for the matchmakers to make. Now, before I conclude, I mentioned MMA Milo is out doing something incredibly dangerous. And apparently he's made it back alive, but he's going to tell you all about it during our next show. But he, as most of you know, he is one of the nation's top up-and-coming youth surfers. And part of that involves going to the North Shore of Hawaii, surfing the famous pipeline. For those of you that don't know surfing, it is which might be most of you or all of you. It is the most dangerous wave in the world. Dozens of people have died there. The North Shore in general, it is on a swell like this. So when I say a swell like this, it's called a double XL swell. It's 25 to 30 feet. It's incredibly dangerous. Three people have already drowned since October on the North Shore. Pro surfers have died there. I mean, it is legitimately dangerous. I mean, incredibly dangerous. Milo survived. He was out at 25 to 30 foot pipeline, took a big one on the head. He was wearing a helmet because there is it is a shallow reef despite the size of the wave. And then he did something that was even dumber than that. And that's what I will tell you on the next show. So tune in, and this will blow your mind like nothing you've heard before. In the meantime, hope you enjoy the fights, and thank you for watching.